Good evening. Tonight we have a short presentation which will highlight the Spring City Elementary planning process. This work over the last 12 months brings us to the recommendation of the administration. As presented at the January 7th work session meeting, the planning process identified 4 options for Spring City Elementary. The primary objective of the planning team was to address building infrastructure and system needs, documented through our facilities condition assessment, and to solve for projected increase in enrollment. The options were: 1, close Spring City Elementary; 2, address building systems and infrastructure only; 3, renovate and build an addition; and 4, tear down and build a new school. We looked at the operational advantages and disadvantages of closing Spring City Elementary. Some of the advantages are capital investment savings, operational savings, which include utilities, maintenance, and custodial costs, possible proceeds from sale of the property. Some of the disadvantages were Spring City loses a school that's been in their community for over 60 years, redistricting of all elementary school boundaries to balance building utilization percentages, increased transportation costs, limited options for future planning. Option 2 is the replacement of the existing building equipment and systems within the original building footprint. This option does not provide educational space that we see in our other elementary schools. This would require students to be relocated for 1 year during construction. The cost for this option has been estimated at $10.75 million and is the minimum amount of work required if the building is to remain open. Option 3. This option includes a total renovation and mechanical upgrade to the building, which will provide an as-new look to the building's interior finishes. The 7,000 square feet addition accounts for projected enrollment growth and expanded educational space in alignment with our other elementary schools. The total cost for this option is estimated at $17.4 million. Building a new school was one of the possible options, but as we vetted this option, it became clear it may be cost prohibitive. The estimated $24 million price tag exceeded the amount allocated in the proposed 10-year facilities plan. Administration's recommendation is to move forward with option 3, which is the renovation addition. This option addresses the needs we were trying to solve for: deferred maintenance and capital investment costs, capacity issues, increased space for educational programming. It also supports future planning decisions. The investment in this building today is going to be much less costly than an investment in the building tomorrow, given the trend of inflation. Option 3 is circled in red, as it is the recommendation of the administration. This is an unoccupied renovation that will require student relocation for 1 year. There was an estimated cost of $225,000 for additional busing services for the relocation year. The construction costs have been estimated at $17.4 million, which includes all design costs. The $17.4 million construction estimate for Spring City was included in the 10-year facilities plan presentation back in September, which used debt service drop-off to fund the project. This chart shows an August of 2025 completion date, which is contingent on design approval in March of this year. Again, administration's recommendation is circled in red, which is the unoccupied renovation with addition. This chart is broken down into 3 decision-making processes, each having financial commitment, and each will require separate board approvals. Phase 1 is schematic design, which has a March of 2023 approval date. Schematic design starts with the district meeting with the design team to develop a building design that fits program needs, including a complete description of building systems, interior-exterior finishes, and visual renderings for owner approval. A construction budget will be developed based on the information gathered through this design phase. This is the first financial commitment based on option 3, which is $341,000. If for whatever reason the board decides not to move forward after this phase, the district will have no further financial obligation, and we would own the work completed to date. The next is phase 2, which has an August of 2023 approval date. It includes design development, construction documents, and public bidding. Design development is when the district selects a final design and the work starts on the structural details of the building. Construction documents include blueprints, technical specifications, and permit requirements for bidding. The bidding phase, this is where the project goes out to public bid for contractor pricing. Once bids are received, they are reviewed, and the lowest qualified bid is identified. This would be the second financial commitment based on option 3 at $1.18 million. If the board decides not to continue moving forward after this phase, the district will have a total of $1,521,000 invested and will own buildable construction drawings for this project. And lastly is the third phase. This is the contractor notice to proceed. After all the construction documents and contracts have been reviewed by the solicitor, the board would need to approve this last step. This is the third and final financial commitment to award a construction contract to the lowest qualified bidder. This timeline is based on approval for schematic design this month, and delaying this could result in a mid-year school move for 25-26 or push to a 26-27 school opening. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. So before we open up the floor for questions, just want to defer to Mr. Rizzo and or Mr. Jackson as Chair of Property if you have anything else that you would like to add.
I would say this is the first step in a series of steps that we need to take in spring forward to kind of help bring things into alignment with where we need to be educationally. We talked about the 5, 6, 7 and some needs that need to be addressed there by committing to the Reno Ad project at Spring City. That keeps some doors open for us with 5th grade and what we want to do with that, allowing us to work towards a middle school model. It helps us in terms of if we close Spring City, we have to have a different conversation about what we're going to do with secondary buildings. So, you know, when we look at the bigger picture, this is the first step, but this is making sure we step in the right direction first is, I think, where we need to go. And I would, again, as Mr. Hunter mentioned, I recommend moving forward with option 3.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam President. This presentation, we've presented it several times. There's been numerous discussions at many different levels, even on a Saturday. What you have in here, we have a 3-step process, which gives this board the opportunity, or the next board the opportunity to evaluate as we move on. As Mr. Hunter made reference to, depending on if there is a stop, we own all the intellectual property for the building. So if the board decides a no-go on step 2, we own those documents. So if the next board decides to move forward with this, that is available. But I think what's been presented by property, it's been discussed in finance, and Mr. Hunter and his team, and along with the consultants, have done a fantastic job presenting the facts. From there, it's up to the board to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Questions or comments from the board? And I'll start in person first, then I will go to Zoom.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification. So this has nothing to do with the other projects that Mr. Rizzo had kind of mentioned about, like the 8th grade center, things like that. The work that would need to be done on those, would some of them be parallel to this or after this kind of work?
So, I mean, they're all linked in terms of how we support the district K-12, but this is a decision made in isolation in that we're not committing to any other projects. It just allows us to have flexibility for whatever our next steps are going to be.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
So I had a couple things. Mr. Hunter, I think you were very clear about the first step and the second step with the dates and the amounts. Just for the audience, I didn't hear you say about the third piece of that with the date and the money at that step.
Yes, the third step is the notice to proceed for the contractor. So once we receive our lowest responsible bid, that will be the decision to move forward on that piece of the project. So we would commit to the renovation addition at that particular time. That timeline, excuse me one second, that's April of '24. We would have to make that decision.
And what would be the spend at that time that the board would need to authorize?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
What would be the spend at that time that the board would need to authorize by
Well-
April of '24?
So we look at the $17.4 million budget minus the design fees. So it's going to be the actual construction cost from the contractor at that point,
So,
to be
in-
determined. But we had
Right,
budgeted up
so-
to,
so if it's 17 and we're spending 341 and then we're spending, I think it's 1.2 or almost 1.2. So that rest of that full balance, so about 15 million would be authorized by the board or would need to be in April of '24.
that's correct. That's what we're going to be using as our budget number, not to exceed the total cost of 17.4.
Okay, and then, so this had come up in property too, and I do think it should be out there for everyone, and I think Mr. Schaefer raised a good point when I had asked about this. But I know these things are being done in isolation that we're talking about here, but there is a bigger picture that we've been talking about for the full district. So in light of that, my question there had been, and really remains, would doing these things to this building change if a different option for some of the other areas was selected? And I think that's a roundabout way of saying that, is there a possibility, I think as Mr. Schaefer had raised, that Spring City could close based on the other things that we have discussed? And if so, I don't want to frivolously, and I'm sure nobody here does, wants to spend that $341,000, but it's something to at least take into consideration. Is that completely going off the table, no matter what we talk about with the other things in the district, if we were to do these renovations?
My answer, and I'll defer to Mr. Rizzo, so we looked at the needs for Spring City Elementary and the facility needs, the capital investment, deferred maintenance, as well as the expanded enrollment that's projected in '25. So that's where we made the decision. I can't speak on behalf of any further with closing the school. I would defer any questions for closure to Mr. Rizzo.
In your roundabout way, I am lost. I don't know, because it feels like you just said that there has been talk that we may need to close that school for some reason. Could you please clarify what you just said?
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah, no, that wasn't really, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is that I know we're taking this in isolation, but I do think we need to look at the whole picture of what's happening in the district, because if we're going to do some other things where, you know,
What are the
well,
other
some of
things?
the discussions that have been around the Flex Building or the 8th grade center or any of that.
All-day kindergarten.
And the kindergarten. Is this still the renovation that we need for this building? Is this still a wise spend?
And we did talk about this in property, like you said.
And I
do you-
just
so
wanted
you-
to bring it up here to have
Right,
that fully.
understandable, so that everybody here can hear that.
Absolutely.
So were you unsatisfied with the answer that you received at property, or did
A little
you?
bit, yes. I'm not going to say that, a little bit, because I think when Mr. Schaefer brought up that point, is that completely off the table then or not? Because
Is what? I'm
I guess
sorry.
the closure, is that,
I guess, let me jump in here. I didn't, all due respect, I did not understand the question then, I don't understand the question now. As we've talked about, this is part of an overall plan. This is a plan that we've talked about, and that includes every facility that's in the district. And I think I gave an example with three little moving parts. So if we did not do, let's say, Spring City, and we did the 8th grade center, I think it's your question, would that impact enrollment? Would that impact the operational, well, I'm trying to understand your question.
Just want to make sure that if we're going to spend this kind of money, even if it's $341,000 and we stop there, I just want to make sure that if we're spending that we're doing things or we're planning to do things to Spring City that work for the long run, no matter what other changes we make across the district. That's all I'm saying, that I want to make sure that it's a wise spend.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead. I think the administration, for one, I think Mr. Hunter and his team and the consultants, we have done a deep dive into this, evaluated all of the practical approaches, including financial evaluations, to be where we are now. What would happen if we didn't do Spring City? I don't know. What's the next bank that's going to go under? I don't know. So, but I think the analysis that's been put forth by the professionals, the administration, Mr. Hunter and his talented team has presented the picture of where we are right now. So I think Spring City, as far as the 10-year plan, Spring City is one of 12 other buildings that will be addressed based on the financial commitments of the district, based on the financial cost of these proposed projects over an extended period of time. Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment.
Mrs. Deardorff, could I pause for 1 second to allow Mr. Rizzo to continue and make a comment about what we were just speaking about?
All right, so I'm going to approach this from two different angles. If we close Spring City, let's say we close it, we're losing 36,000 square feet ballpark of school. So what does that do for us? Well, that means that we redistrict at the elementary level, and we're at that point going to commit to, in my opinion, not doing any grade shifts. And then we're going to have to commit to doing something with the 8th grade center that could be much more costly than what we're doing at Spring City. And we're kind of assuming based on where we think the direction is going to go. So let's say we close Spring City. We're now going to commit to keeping 5, 6, 7 the way that it is. And then we're going to have to commit to doing something with the 8th grade center or building a new building that could accommodate 8th grade only. So I think closing it limits our options. Keeping it open, we are open to being able to address some of the concerns that I've seen since I came here, which is namely parity at Spring City. And full disclosure, if you close Spring City, you achieve parity anyway because they're going to other buildings. That's not, in my opinion, the best way to go about that, but it gives you parity at Spring City. And what I mean by that is equivalent educational options or facilities with the other 6 elementary schools. It addresses or gives us the opportunity to address the transitions, K to 4, 5, 6, 1 schedule, 7 another schedule, 8 by themselves, 9 by themselves, then 10 through 12. That reduces one of those transitions, and then it allows us to be able to really, in my opinion, have appropriately address that middle school, which is an area we're focusing on right now, which allows us to have a focus. And, and if we go that way, again, this is me right now, but it allows us to have a true middle school model, grades 6, 7, and 8, where they're all on the same schedule, and we can really target educational practices that are geared towards that grade instead of having an elementary and a middle school in the same site. So I think it keeps the door open for a lot of options for us moving forward. Closing Spring City reduces options. Updating it keeps our options open. And then when it comes, we have to do something with Spring City. We're going to have to do, and I think Mr. Hunter alluded to this, the do nothing option is to invest $10 million to make sure that it looks the same, but it's updated. So we're going to spend $10 million to keep it open. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to keep it open, add 7,000 square feet, and get the parity that we're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Rizzo. We'll go to Mrs. Deardorff, and then I want to defer to Zoom to see if Dr. Motzer or Ms. Earl has questions.
I'm actually glad that Mr. Rizzo went before me because that's a big, I think, factor in my personal opinion as one board member about Spring City Elementary is providing an equivalent educational opportunity to the students of Spring City, which they do not have right now. That's clear. And then to piggyback on what you said, it would cost $10 million just to make the building look better and a little bit updated. So that's the do nothing, right? Other than if you don't close the school, the do nothing, the not expand or look better. It's going to cost $10 million. And then this project we're talking about to bring it up to an equitable situation with the rest of our schools is like an additional 7, you know. So I think that's very important. And I think it's also not to equivalate our students at Spring City Elementary as square footage. We are Spring-Ford School District. Spring City puts the spring in Spring-Ford. To talk about a different direction that the district may go in, I don't think that as long as I'm sitting here, I would support a direction that doesn't support Spring City, recognizing them as who they are and what they are and the importance that they bring to our community. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Ms. Deerdorf. Before I go back to the in-person to see if there's any more questions or comments, can I ask Dr. Moser or Ms. Earl, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I've seen this presentation a couple times, and I think I'm good.
Thank you. Dr. Moser?
I don't have any questions either. Thank you so much.
Okay. Great. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you. So number one, I appreciate so very much such passion around the borough of Spring City. My mom grew up there, attended church my entire life in the borough. I love Spring City. Somehow, however, we're forgetting that these students from the grades 5th through 12th cross that large bridge and somehow fall into an abyss where we've forgotten that they live in Spring City. So I'm not gonna, I mean, I'm obviously outvoted here. I just feel that there's an opportunity for us to redistrict, open up the door for some of these other conversations of massive improvements. And this is, you know, I mean, it's a tough decision, but, you know, the reality is for the Spring City community is their kids are going to be out of that school for 1 out of 4 years anyway, right, with this construction. So in terms of redistricting, I just don't see it as a significant, you know, negative situation, but I have a feeling I am strongly outvoted on this, and so, you know, I hope the best.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. And as you know, there's no vote right now, and we value each board member's opinion regardless of the outcome. So thank you for sharing. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I would just like to stress again and again, what's being asked here is a first step. And the board has the opportunity to vote that step either way they see fit. If there is a positive vote, there's another vote. So I just want to be very clear here. This ask is not for the lump sum. This ask is for $341,000 of a start. I just want to be real clear because I'm not convinced everyone understands that. It is $341,000, step 1. Step 2 is much further down the line along with step 3. And at any time, this board or the next board could say no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Mrs. Weingarten?
So looking at that step 1, we have the schematics built back and forth. I know this answer, but the community will be able to see that as we progress, correct?
Yes, once the schematic's complete, we're going to see that for owner approval. So we would have to make a decision that this meets our program needs and the building design, and we would approve that.
I assumed so. I just wanted to make sure that the community knew that they would have a chance to have their eyeballs on this and take a look. So thank you.
Mrs. Zazowski?
Just want to say, too, I appreciate the fact that there are 3 distinct steps outlined with, you know, where it can stop or go forward. And while I did go round and round, my question really was, and maybe is, I just want to be sure that if we were to spend all 3 of these steps to do this project, that no matter what other decisions we make in the district, they'll flow from that, and that we would still, and the Spring City school community would still benefit from having had those renovations done. That's my biggest, and I believe you answered that at the meeting, but I think it's important to answer that again here for the public.
Yeah, I firmly believe that. As far as the investment that we're putting into the building, okay, so it does leave us option for additional growth into the building. If it's going to be a grade reconfiguration and/or kindergarten, it's taken into account for that. So we're not building to the student capacity designated in 2025. So there is room for growth in what we decide to do moving forward. We will not have to go back and revisit Spring City if a decision is made to potentially reconfigure grade or to go to full-day kindergarten. You're not going to be back adding on to what we've already laid out for this plan, if that makes sense.
That's all I wanted to hear. Thank you.
We said that before.
I wanted to hear it straightforward.
All right. Any other questions or comments?